people that generally associate Bolivia with the Andes, but actually a third of the country lies within the Amazon basin. In my opinion, it's the best part of South America to explore the Amazon, because it's easier to visit, access. Anyone who's familiar with a map of South America will know that Bolivia sits in the middle. But I didn't really know that much about the country at the time. But as soon as I crossed the border and travelled around for a few weeks, I was absolutely captivated by the place. But you go up a little bit in altitude there, and then you can go on to Sucre, which again is another rise in altitude, but not so severe. And then once you're in Sucre, you can prepare yourself for either Potosi or for La Paz or for Salar de Uyuni, or indeed for Lake Titicaca bus journey, or an incredible and most spectacular flight from La Paz. Now, I try not to encourage people to take internal flights as much as possible, but this flight is it's only half an hour, but it takes you up over the Andes, and then you just see the Andes collapse into the foothills, and then into the Amazon basin.
Welcome to the Winging It Travel podcast with me, James Hammond. Every Monday, I'll be joined by guests to talk about their travel stories, travel tips, backpacking advice, and so much more. Right now, I'm taking the podcast on the road travelling with me. So tune in every week for short-form episodes detailing all my travels alongside my Monday guest episode. Are you a backpacker, gap year student, or simply someone who loves to travel? Then this is the podcast for you, designed to inspire you to travel. There'll be stories to tell, tips to share, and experiences to inspire. Welcome to the show.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode, where I'm joined by Shafik Meghji, an award-winning journalist, travel writer, author, editor, broadcaster and photographer. We're going to talk about his book, Crossed Off the Map, Travels in Bolivia today, as well as other South American travels. Shafik, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thanks very much for having me on the show, James. I'm really looking forward to talking to you.
Yeah, looking forward to chat big time. Where are you based right now?
So I'm speaking to you from South London. It's chilly and grey here, disappointingly. So, but it'll be nice to be talking about more exotic and certainly warmer climes a bit later on.
It's going to get really cold next week, isn't it? Or next couple of weeks? I've read online.
It has been threatened, but given that we've emerged from one of the hottest Octobers on record, followed by, which I think was also one of the wettest Octobers on record. It's increasingly difficult to predict, but I think more cold weather is on its way. So that's something to look forward to for us Londoners.
Yeah, I look forward to it when I come back next week. Lovely. Okay, for most of the interviews I do, I like to go back to the start of time to get an idea where travel really came into your life. But initially, where did you grow up, and was there any early memories of travel?
Yeah, so I grew up in southwest London. I mean, living in southeast London at the moment, so I haven't moved too far away. But my earliest memories are really, family holidays. My parents loved travel, and they really instilled that in my sister and I. So we would go away a lot in the UK. So North Wales, did a lot of swimming in cold seas in North Wales, and absolutely loved it, and would stay on farms and that kind of stuff. But also going, like kind of classic package holiday stuff, going to Spain, going to Greece. And that really instilled in me from a young age a love of travel, a love of eating different types of food, a love of swimming in the sea, and a love of exploration. And that kind of really developed as I got older, and then obviously it's become a career more recently.
The package holidays that you mentioned, I think we're roughly the same age, right? I do recall in UK that they were quite cheap back in the day, where you could literally buy something, I want to say £100 or something, and it gets you like a flight there and back, maybe with like a little hotel for 3 or 4 days. I don't know if I've got that maybe wrong, but I do seem to recall that was a viable option if you had a little bit of spare income. But nowadays it seems a bit crazy. But back in the day, I think it was an option.
Yeah, I think it was during that period. I mean, certainly kind of like the 80s and 90s, probably in the 70s as well. That kind of the package tourism really emerged and kind of democratized travel really for a lot of people, and kind of helped to open up the world, certainly from a UK perspective, certainly Europe, and then kind of obviously a bit more recently that cheaper flights. We're talking about budget flights off air beforehand, but including like long haul flights. So yeah, it was kind of, I think it was, lucky to have grown up in that period, really, because it seems to be a bit of a sweet spot where you didn't have to be earning an absolute fortune to be able to take your family away on a summer holiday. Whereas, just looking at, package holiday prices this year, both in the UK and further afield, and flights in general, things are much more expensive. So I think I was lucky to be around at that time.
Yeah, I think the post-COVID travels that we experienced this year was way more expensive than I anticipated, which was a bit of a shock. Probably hence why I'm finishing a little bit early, because I couldn't believe actually how expensive it was, if I'm honest. Maybe there's different ways of making it cheaper, but I'll come back to Heathrow, for instance. The flight from Canada and off peak is okay. Like long haul flight from Vancouver to London or Calgary to London is like £150. It's ridiculous. But on the whole, I think it has got way more expensive. And I think that's been a bit of a shock this year. I don't know what you found maybe this year with traveling in general, but maybe they're catching up because of COVID. I'm not sure. But it seems to be in a direction where, oh, wow, it is going that direction. It's going really expensive. It's quite tough out there, I think.
Yeah, I mean, my experience, both professional travels and also holidays, is just that prices have rocketed. Obviously, in the UK and Europe, and I'm guessing in North America as well. Really, inflation has, and energy costs have been a huge issue. That's obviously had a knock-on effect on hotels and food and obviously on flights. There are definitely still ways to that you can travel on a budget. You have to be a bit smarter, I guess, a bit savvy, and also as has always been the case, if you've got a bit more time available, if you can be a bit flexible with things, which obviously suits people who are backpacking or kind of people who are not tied to school holidays, you can still get if not bargains, then certainly better value deals. But it's definitely a pricey proposition for people at the moment.
Yeah, I wonder if it'll go down. Like petrol goes up and you think, oh, it's just a phase, but it always stays up. You do wonder, is travel now in that phase where it's gone up? Certain things, is it going to come back down, or are they going to keep at those prices? But I guess that depends on inflation and other costs. But I do wonder where it's going.
I mean, I would like to be optimistic and say, I'm sure in a couple of years it will come down and it will be, the golden age will be back again. I suspect probably we just have to get used to kind of high costs across the board, and maybe that's we have to be a bit more flexible with the way that we travel and choose different destinations, but undoubtedly maximize the trips that we do make. Really, because it's if it's a greater financial investment than it was previously.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think it's people get a bit more cute about it. I think a way to maybe reduce costs when traveling, but not easy. Harder said than done. In terms of your early sort of travel career, if you like, was there like a trip maybe could be with your family or as a young adult where you really thought, oh wow, I do actually love doing this. Like it's probably something I would like to maybe do more in the future, or even working.
Yeah, I mean, it was the family holidays definitely instilled an early interest in travel. But throughout my teens, I wanted to be a sports journalist. I mean, I'm a frustrated footballer, really. When that didn't work out, I wanted to write about it. I thought that was the next best thing. So so I did a politics degree, and then I did a journalism postgrad diploma after university, and then I worked for the Evening Standard as a news and sports reporter. And I did that for about just over a year. I mean, I was the youngest person in the office at the time, so I was doing 5 a.m. shift one week, 5 p.m. shift the next. Not super sociable. But I was doing what I'd wanted to do. I was covering football matches and cricket matches and that kind of thing. But like wanderlust kicked in, and my girlfriend at the time was very keen to go traveling. I hadn't taken a gap year, but I thought, kind of eventually itchy feet got too much, and I thought, well, look, I'll resign. Let's go backpacking for the best part of a year. So I went to India, where I have some family heritage, and then spent almost 6 months backpacking around South America. And it was in South America, a place I've been interested in since I was a kid, and watching David Attenborough documentaries and watching South American football teams at the World Cup, and learning about ancient civilizations such as the Incas. it was during that time in South America that I started writing my first travel pieces, and I was an inveterate user of guidebooks. Using Lonely Planet and Rough Guides, and it was at that time I thought, wow, I wonder who writes these books. That would be a great job. Perhaps I can do it. So eventually the money ran out, and I had to come back to London. I thought, well, let's try and make a career shift. And I contacted and sent letters and wrote sample chapters and phoned and did all these things to every travel publisher you can think of, and didn't really hear anything back at all. And then out of the blue, about 8 months after getting back, and after a lot of banging my head against the wall, I got an email out of the blue from Rough Guides, and a new editorial assistant had just started, had found an unopened letter from me, because I thought maybe if I wrote a physical letter, that might attract their attention a bit more than an email. I was trying anything at that point. Anyway, she found the unopened letter, passed it on to one of the editorial directors, who invited me in for a meeting. And that basically got my foot in the door. A few months later, a chance opportunity came up on the Rough Guide to the Baltic States. Sadly, no longer with us. But and I'd happened to have been to Estonia a few times in the previous years, just on holiday. So I jumped to the chance, and then that got me into guidebooks, and I've done about 45 odd guidebooks over the last 14, 15 years or so, and that led into doing travel features, and then for newspapers and magazines, and that in turn led to me write my first book, probably just see over my shoulder, which is Crossed Off the Map. So but it was that was guidebooks was really my route into the industry.
Oh, it's very interesting. I'm slightly in the same situation as we described, a bit frustrated into 8 months later coming in. Like, I'm just like pitching a load of stuff all the time a minute, because I've just done a year's travels. I think I've got quite a few interesting angles, but I'm not the best writer, so there's a bit of imposter syndrome there. But I'm just like writing chapters, synopsis and stuff like that, just in pitching emails, and like you say, you don't really hear anything much. I've had a few no's, which is fine. I actually appreciate them saying no, because it means they've read it. But it's like planting seeds, isn't it? You just like plant them, and you keep pitching out ideas, and hopefully one will just get you sort of in the door. And that's kind of the phase I'm in at the minute, which I appreciate. I think being older actually helps, because when you're younger, you do probably get frustrated, like, why it's not happening? But when you're older, you kind of appreciate it takes time, and you just need to put in there a bit more of the world. You just need to keep pushing and pitching away. And I think that's a key thing. It kind of links to the podcast as well. You just keep doing it and keep plugging away. But that's kind of the phase I'm in at the minute.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, pitching is a thankless task in travel journalism, in any form of freelance journalism or writing, and the no's or the silences or the no responses are more common than the yeses. But I think it definitely, as you say, it helps coming in perhaps a bit later, when you kind of you can step back from it. It is the rejections aren't personal, even though it often feels like that. But it's really, I mean, certainly from my own experience and from travel writer friends of mine, it's just there's no magic formula to it. So it's kind of it's persistence, hard work, and also a bit of luck. And and when the opportunities come along, it's just kind of grabbing them with both hands. But definitely developing a thick skin for both pitching and the inevitable rejections is kind of a key part of writing and journalism in general.
I think that's kind of, I appreciate that, and that's kind of where I'm at the minute. Also, with a quick question, because it's got off on a little tangent a little bit, is about football. What team do you support? I sort of tell my friends that I retired at 8 years old because I had a trial for Norwich City and then got rejected. Actually got told no in person. I don't know if you've ever had trials before, but they put you all in like lines and they read names out and like, well, these people can go home. And then at 8 years old, you get told in front of everyone that you're going home. Pretty humiliating a little bit. Been told you're not good enough. And that's, I think, probably that thick skin at 8 years old. So I probably thought, bugger this, I'm not going to do it anymore. So I retired at 8 years old. So who's your team and what's your background in sport? Because sport actually played an important part for me for traveling, actually, in the early days.
Yeah, I mean, I think your experience at the trials has given you a good experience of an early age for pitching. So, so you can maybe thank the coaches, thank the coaches for that. Yeah, so my team is Liverpool. I mean, I'm a South Londoner. The closest
Mm.
team to me growing up was Crystal Palace, so I should be a Crystal
Palace,
Palace supporter.
yeah.
And Crystal Palace were the first, the first team that I used to go along with a friend whose parents had season tickets. But I watched Liverpool play at Crystal Palace, and fell in love at a young, impressionable age. And your football team you is a decision you make at an early age, and it's
Early
for
age,
life.
yeah.
So that was kind of and I still love football now, and I've played all my life really. I'm still playing. I'm playing tomorrow as well.
Yeah.
But football definitely plays a part within travel. Scrolling back to that first backpacking trip around South America.
Yeah.
One of the ways I was supporting myself and earning a bit of cash while I was out there, as well as doing a few travel pieces, was just writing regular bits of journalism. And one of the articles was on the Beach Football World Cup, which was being held on the Copacabana Beach in Rio.
Yeah.
While I was there, so that was good fun. Eric Cantona was in. He wasn't actually playing, but he was one of the helping to promote the tournament.
Yeah,
and lots of, and I'm sure it's probably familiar. Something you'll be familiar as well with, that there's being in hotel rooms or hostel rooms, or trying to find a bar at odd times of the day or night, trying to find a channel that's showing showing the Premier League football or the international football, and actually and often that leads into kind of good connections with people. And I always like to watch the local teams as much as I can while I'm away. I mean, the greatest stadium that I've ever been to is the Maracanã in Rio. The original Maracanã, not the one that's been rebuilt for the relatively recent World Cup. But lots and lots of happy memories of watching various football games on in bars and restaurants and in areas of cities that I probably wouldn't have got to otherwise. And and football's a great icebreaker, even if you have nothing nothing else in common. If you got no real language in common, you can always make yourself understood through football. So it's played and continues to play a big part in my life.
Yeah, I remember being in Puerto Rico once, and I support Ipswich. So the problem with supporting a team in the second division, like Championship, is that you're never really on TV. If you support Liverpool, you might have a bit of an easier chance. But anyway, we're playing Norwich as a derby. I was in Puerto Rico. It's probably about 7 a.m. in the morning. I was like, can I find anywhere? So I'm running out of the hostel, running around San Juan's, the town, like the capital city. Just cannot find anywhere. No bar open, no nothing. So I was pretty devastated. But it is a problem if you don't support one of the big teams. And I actually went to the Ashes in 2010-11 when we won it in Australia, which is a rare occurrence. And that trip to Australia, because I went there only because of the cricket, really, with my friends. Great experience because we won, and Melbourne was an unbelievable experience when we beat Australia. But just being in Australia actually sort of tickled the travel wanderlust, really, and that changed my mind and life a little bit, actually, that trip. So sport does play an important part. And then, I went to 2014 World Cup, saw Messi score in Maracanã. Probably the highlight of watching football. In terms of like live games, that's pretty special. In amongst Argentinian fans, he scored at my end. Yeah, it's pretty cool. But love sport, love football. I do wonder if there's like a niche. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen a sports travel podcast like combined. I do wonder if there's like that sort of podcast.
I mean, I think there's definitely space for one. I haven't come across one. There is a book that I've seen online that looks really interesting, which is about visiting football, going to football matches around South America. Forgive me, I forget the name of the author, but I thought, that piqued my interest, so I'm hoping to read that at some point. I think there's definitely scope for podcasts and for more articles and probably books on this subject, because it's kind of it's a universal, and there's so many different stories to explore. South America, one of my passions. If you really want to understand any South American country, virtually any South American country, it's through sport, and predominantly through football. So it's a great way to get a feel for a country.
Yeah, I think like sports and football podcasts is very saturated. Like there's a ton you can watch on YouTube, whatever. I do feel like there's probably no space for that unless you're like specific to one club maybe or whatever. But I do wonder if you just concentrate on the element of travel within sport, as in like you go to watch a match Americana, where it's like combined. It's not like solely about the sport and the game. It's about you go to the game obviously for 90 minutes, but what you're doing the rest of the time there, like that. I wonder if that combination could work. Yeah, it's quite an interesting one because I think we all read and hear about each of those things quite a lot, travel and sport. But I wonder if you combine it together solely, and it's quite a niche topic. I don't know. I'll think about it.
Yeah. I mean, definitely have to think about it. I mean, I'll be tuning in if you get it up and running.
Yeah,
certainly.
Writing perspective, were you always a writer? Was that always a thing you're interested in?
Yeah, I was always, I've kind of loved writing from an early age. I enjoyed it at school, and kind of slightly atypically, as I say, I knew what I wanted to do, or I thought I knew what I wanted to do, which was be a sports reporter. So I worked on at school. I worked on the school paper. I was a sports editor of the school paper.
Yeah.
I was the sports editor of my university newspaper. I did all my work experience during GCSE and A level. I did one at Sky Sports. Which was great fun, and I did one at 90 Minutes Football Magazine.
Oh yeah,
sadly departed, but a great magazine of its time. I was always keen on newspapers, magazines, writing, expressing myself kind of in that way. And so even though the subject matter has changed, kind of the basic love of writing has continued.
Okay. And I think we'll go into South America because obviously that's probably a passion of yours and it is of mine. I need to get back really, but can we talk about Bolivia? So cross off the map your book. First of all, what was the idea for your book? Because I read that you were sort of traveling around Bolivia area for like a decade almost, would you say?
Yeah. I mean, so I first visited Bolivia before I was travel writing when I was, after I'd quit sports journalism and was, backpacking around South America. And at the time, I didn't really know much about Bolivia at all. I was doing the classic kind of gringo trail stuff. I was in Rio for Carnival, and then I was going to hike the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu in Peru, and essentially just needed, what was the most direct, cost-effective way to get from one to the other. And anyone who's familiar with a map of South America will know that Bolivia sits in the middle. But I didn't really know that much about the country at the time. But as soon as I crossed the border and travelled around for a few weeks, I was absolutely captivated by the place. Initially, it was just the landscapes, the Salar de Uyuni, the world's biggest salt flat, an incredible otherworldly landscape, Lake Titicaca, some of the highest cities on earth. It was my first glimpse of the Andes in real life. And I absolutely got captivated with it at that stage. And then, scroll forward a few years and I'm writing guidebooks for Rough Guides. And then an opportunity came to work on the Rough Guide to Bolivia about now probably 14 years ago. And that was fantastic because it gave me an excuse to go back to Bolivia. It gave me an excuse to visit virtually every part of the country to do research for the guidebook. And I think I was also lucky that not only did I get to explore the country, that it was an incredibly dramatic time for the country in terms of politics and society and culture and economics. I mean, the country had its first indigenous leader. It was going through an incredible economic boom for much of that period, and there were huge changes in society. So all of those kind of fed in, and so I kind of got the idea. Well, I think this would be a good idea for a book, just because it's a country that people aren't really familiar with outside. I say outside of South America, even amongst its South American neighbors, it's often overlooked. Yet it has this fantastic, incredibly rich history. It's had a huge, unexpected impact on the world at large, the world that we live in today. And it's also, it kind of felt, like it's on the front line of lots of the issues that we're talking about around the world in our own lives. The climate emergency, of course, but also things like populism, the war on drugs, migration. So it's kind of a lot of these interesting strands fed in together. And I thought, that's it. I wanted to explore that in a book, and and so crossed off the map the result of it. So it kind of looks back at its fantastic history. It showcases the some of the world's most incredible landscapes, and it also kind of has nuggets of insight on some of these touchstone issues and how Bolivia is coping with them, and what lessons and principles and stories might be relevant for us as we deal with them in the years to come.
I don't even know why I went to Bolivia, if I'm honest. Maybe a lot of travelers do this, where they get to the salt flats in the west. Unbelievable area, by the way. And then you finish in uni and you just think, oh, that's Bolivia. Well, I guess I'll go east. But I had no information, no real things that I want to go and see. I was just kind of traveling with a group at the time who were in my Jeep at the uni. So I went in there completely unaware, no plan whatsoever, and it absolutely blew my mind. And it does go under the radar of South America, you're right, even amongst seasoned travelers a little bit. I mean, there's the three countries at the top, like Suriname, Guyana, French Guiana, and arguably now Venezuela, that they kind of don't get talked about that much at all. But Bolivia is definitely up there with not being talked about. But it is pretty incredible. So I do want to ask some questions about it, really, if you're willing to have a go at it. So Bolivia, in terms of politically right now, where are they sitting, do you think? Because when I was there, this is 10 years ago, so it's a while ago now, there were protests. I remember there were sit-down protests on the road, so you couldn't go anywhere sometimes. I can't remember if it's food or gas prices. People weren't happy. So where are they sitting right now, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge question that I could spend the rest of the podcast talking to you about, but I will try and condense it into a nice, pithy, concise response. I mean, anyone that visits Bolivia will find that Bolivians are incredibly politically engaged, and public protest is a huge part of everyday life. If you spend any period of time there, spend a couple of weeks there traveling around, you'll almost invariably see a protest or two, or find that roads are blocked off, or that there's a strike or something like that. There's been a lot of political turbulence over the years. Compared to a few years ago, it's more stable now.
Okay. Yeah.
It's difficult making detailed predictions about where Bolivian politics is going to go. It's certainly something that shouldn't put people off traveling.
No, absolutely not.
There, at all. It's not. There's not instability that, say, you might associate with Venezuela at the moment. So, but it's definitely something, and it's worth knowing a bit more about the context. So just informing yourself a little bit before you get out there, because you'll be able to understand a little bit more about what's going on around you. And seeing some of the protests, which are loud and colourful, and it's an interesting experience that visitors inevitably get.
Yeah, I think it shouldn't put people off. I think I found that Bolivians are incredibly
hospitable.
Yes, that's the one. For welcoming tourists in, they've got quite a quirky sense of humour, actually, I found, with South Americans. And I actually think they're probably looked down upon on a lot of other South American countries, I don't know if that's a fair statement. Some Argentinians say, you're going there. Like, oh, yeah. People should ignore that. I think that's a great country, very colourful, and they are very proud of what it is. And I think their indigenous stats are really good as well, like compared to other countries. Yeah. So I think it's a pretty cool country.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, there is prejudice towards indigenous South Americans in general, and there's a very prominent. Most Bolivians have indigenous heritage, and there's a huge patchwork of indigenous groups that make up the country. And when you're on the streets, you'll hear the Aymara language, you'll hear the Quechua language. Quechua was the language spoken by the Incas, as well as many others, depending on what part of the country you are. Unfortunately, there is prejudice amongst countries, or elements of other countries, I should say. But really exploring the myriad cultures in Bolivia is a real draw for visitors. It's something that you should go and experience, and you'll get an incredible insight into ways of life and beliefs and languages and so on that you may not be familiar with. And it's an incredibly enriching experience.
And we are going to delve into some quick fire Bolivia questions, like how to get there, blah blah blah, what to see. But very quickly, from doing your book, what was one piece of thing that Bolivia does that's actually affected world history, do you think, that's quite impressive, or it's got people talking? Is there one that you can maybe think off the top of your head that people might be surprised at?
Yeah, well, I mean, without revealing too many secrets from
Of
my book,
course.
I'll
They
give
got to
you one
read it.
classic
Yeah.
one. So,
Yeah.
so the city of Potosi, which is an Andean
Yeah.
city, is the second highest city on Earth. And around 500 years ago or so, it was the site of the richest silver mine in history.
Yeah.
Supposedly, according to legend, so much silver came out of the Potosi mines that you could build a solid silver railway track from Potosi all the way to Madrid and still have enough left over for a
Wow.
solid silver engine to ride
Yeah.
on top of it. But that silver changed the world. Essentially, it was it interconnected every continent on Earth for the first time. It was traded through Europe. It helped to fund things like the Industrial Revolution. Huge amounts of it ended up in China, where it was traded for goods that then made the return journey or went to Europe or so on. And the silver, which was used as a currency in China for a period, helped to fund things like the development of the Great Wall of China, for example. It also caused eventually massive hyperinflation that helped to bring down a dynasty. And also, it was the indigenous people were used in the mines, but also enslaved people from Africa were also trafficked over and forced to labor in these mines. And these mines, were absolutely, horrendous conditions. Cerro Rico, which is the main mine, or the mountain where most of the mines are based in Potosi, became known as the mountain that eats men because so many people died.
Okay.
In getting the silver out of it. So that's just one example, and that interconnected trade, globalization, has kind of built up networks that exist today and that have developed since then. Another slightly quirky link is it also gave us the dollar sign. So so silver coins that were minted in Potosi in the Great Mint, which is now an incredible museum. But they were stamped with the initials of Potosi, one P, P and T and S over on top of each other, and that vaguely resembled the dollar sign. So that was
great
later. Later became one of the obviously one of the most recognizable symbols on Earth. So and really that's just scratching the surface with Potosi, because there's lots of fascinating stories about it. One of the streets was literally paved with silver. And it kind of popped up in lots of different and unexpected areas. And today, you can visit the city. It's above 4,000 meters above sea level, so it's a breathless place. You can go into the mines, which I've done, which is an intense experience. If you're claustrophobic, it is not for you, but it is an incredibly enlightening experience. And and Potosi, the silver, was funneled into producing some incredible architecture. So if you like colonial era, Spanish colonial era churches and mansions and that kind of thing, theaters, Potosi's a treasure trove for it. So that would be one example of the impact that Bolivia has had on the world that we live in today.
Okay, we are going to come to Potosi because I've got some questions and I've got some shared experiences here, so I want to come to that. Just quickly though, so your book obviously wraps up a lot of travel advice, history, information about the indigenous population, like your experience as well. So it kind of wraps all that up into like a nice Bolivia personal experience that people can really get stuck into and inspire them to go there.
It's narrative nonfiction, so it's kind of it's using my journeys through the country to tell the story of the country's history, dating back millions of years up to as near to the present day as I could possibly get. And so kind of it showcases, hopefully, it should inspire readers. It's definitely inspired a few reasons to book trips, which has been great. That's so it's inspired a few people, it should inspire you hopefully to visit. But also if you're just an armchair traveler, and you want some fascinating stories about, a part of the world, some of the most dramatic landscapes on Earth, and on the unexpected connections and fragments of forgotten history, it kind of pulls all of that together with, kind of hopefully some portraits of what the country is like at the moment and some of the issues that it's dealing with.
Yeah, I think people should definitely buy that. I'm going to buy it because I need to read it because I need to share my experiences in written form. But I'll put links in the show notes. I'll come to that at the end, but yeah, we'll whack that in the show notes. People can click on that. And maybe the next 10, 15 minutes might even convince people even more because we're going to talk a bit about Bolivia. So as you're talking about Potosi, right? Again, no idea going there. It was like, oh, should we go there? It's quite high up. Why not? Let's go for a laugh. So the first few impressions were, crikey, it is high up. Like I had trouble sleeping. I couldn't really grasp the thin air that well. It took me 2 or 3 days, really. And the problem with Potosi is its hills. I don't know if you found this, like walking to the shop, it's not flat. You have to go up a hill and you're already out of breath. And it's just like really difficult to adapt. So I think you probably maybe have found that experience, but also the mine. Did you do the tour? We have to climb ladders and you've got like the headlight on and it's like pitch dark. Yeah. Anyone claustrophobic, I would recommend not doing this tour because it literally is sort of headgear on, torch, you're in a group, and you are going in darkness to a working mine. Might hear that like muffled explosion somewhere, whatever, where if you don't know where, you can't see where you're going, or you're going up like ladders, you don't even know how far you're going up. I can't actually believe I've done it really, but I did enjoy it. And I was the first one in the group who's got these ladders and sort of embraced it. But the third thing about that Potosi as well, linked to the mines, is did you go to the market as well to buy some stuff? I bought some dynamite, and I couldn't believe I was buying dynamite. That's another thing I couldn't believe as well.
Yeah, well, yeah. If you visit on one of the mine tours, as I'm sure you had the experience of, you're asked to bring some presents for the miners, and also for El Tio, who is the lord of the underworld, who plays a big part in the beliefs and mythology of the miners. And so sticks of dynamite from the market in Potosi is one of the gifts. Coca leaves as well, which also helps you to deal with the altitude, and that are legal in Bolivia. Cocaine is not legal in Bolivia. Question I'm often asked, but coca leaves are and play a central part in many Bolivians' lives. Yeah, and also 100% proof alcohol was the other. The other gift.
I think they got to take like a little sip of it, and that was disgusting. Yeah, that's grim. Also, children's books. I think I remember buying them. Actually, I think that was a nice little touch to give to the miners, that if they've got children, they can like color in books and stuff like that. But yeah, the 100% alcohol, I forgot about that. I remember someone had some as a celebration. I think we sat round. Did you see the statue of the guy with a huge penis, and it's got like leaves thrown at him?
Well, that is El Tio. So the uncle. Is El Tio, so he's the so you see statues of this character who's essentially the lord of the underworld, and he the miners will give offerings such as coca leaves and such as alcohol to to not to anger him because he likes presents, but also hopefully to give themselves some protection in what is still an incredibly dangerous environment. I mean, as I'm sure you found, you're going down these centuries old mine shafts in some cases they're 400 years plus old, and it's a bit safer than it was in the past, but poisonings and collapses and stuff are not unheard of at all, and things like silicosis, which affects people's lungs. So it's an intense experience. I mean, I think an awful lot of people, myself included, do it once, and
there we go.
It's a vivid experience, but you don't necessarily have a desire to do it again. So you also come out with an awful lot of respect for the miners that are going in every day, and some have gone in since they were in their teens as well.
You see this, don't you? Like there's kids that like 12, 13 years old. It's quite also sad to see. You can't believe they got a hard hat on their mining at that age. You think, wow, like that's almost slightly awful, but I guess they just have to do it. They've got to feed their families, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's there's problems with child labor in Bolivia and in the mines, but but as you say, even though the mines are dangerous and the silver has long run out, it's mainly zinc and tin and things like that now. The pay for miners is still above the average for Potosi, and Potosi is once one of the richest places on earth, is now one of the poorest parts of Bolivia. So the mines still provide the most of the local economy. So it still plays a central role. Kind of 500 odd years after the silver reserves were first discovered.
Oh wow, I didn't realize that. I remember the light hitting me as I came out of the mine. That was a bit of a shock, which kind of gives you an appreciation of how dark it is down there. But when you come out to natural light, oh wow, crikey, my eyes were going a little bit. That was a bit of a shock as well. How did you get to Potosi? I think I got a bus there, if I remember correctly, probably from La Paz, if I had a guess. I can't quite remember, but how would you get to Potosi, for example?
Yeah, so for Potosi, I mean, it's the classic. I mean, I've been, I can't remember how many times I've been now. Yeah. Many times. I mean, the classic routine is normally from Sucre, which is a beautiful city,
lovely,
about 2.5 hours drive, and it's lower, so you can, if ideally when you're dealing with altitude, if you can just ascend gradually and in stages, that helps to ease the process. So normally I will go in via Sucre. I have also been in from Uyuni before, kind of going up the newish road, and that obviously prepares you for the altitude as well. I mean, those are the key routes in. And also, if you're going to Potosi, you should really see Sucre as well, Sucre is one of the most beautiful cities in South America, and a lot of the wealth from Potosi was fed into Sucre, which is where lots of the mine owners lived, and it's still technically the capital of Bolivia as well. So it's interesting to see Sucre, which is still a flourishing place and very different, beautiful climate as well, and whitewashed architecture, UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's interesting to see, perhaps the light and the shade with Sucre and with Potosi. So it's high up, but it's easy to get to.
Let's touch on Sucre as well, because that's on my list actually. Yeah, I love the city. Like, I could believe it's chalk and cheese. I think maybe Potosi and La Paz are quite similar vibe, but I found Sucre like, oh wow, this is like white buildings, very calm, nicer altitude, nice little markets. Like the hostel was really nice that we stayed in. Like, couldn't believe what I was seeing, but this is a lovely little place and technically the capital, and a good base for someone maybe just to chill out for a bit in Bolivia, because I know Bolivia can get intense, but maybe Sucre is a nice place just to hang around for a bit.
Yeah, I mean, and absolutely, an awful lot of travelers find their way to Sucre, and in some cases never leave.
Fair.
It's got a big population of former travelers who have arrived from Europe, from North America, and set up shop there. No, it's an absolutely gorgeous city. It isn't hyperbole to say it's from an architectural point of view, one of the most beautiful cities in South America as a whole. It's incredibly well preserved. The center is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's known as the White City because the buildings, the classical buildings from the 17th, 18th, 19th century, all whitewashed. It's got a beautiful main square. And it's great, it's got a really good vibe to it as well. There's some universities there, so it's got a young feel to it. There's some great restaurants. It's really good from a backpacking or traveling point of view. There's lovely hostels. Loads of the lovely buildings been turned into guest houses or hotels. And the surrounding area is really interesting as well. Strong indigenous character there, strong weaving traditions, which you can see at both the markets in Sucre, but also some of the markets in the surrounding towns. Yeah, it's a lovely altitude, particularly it's lower, significantly lower than both Potosi and La Paz, for example. So it's, and that helps with the climate. So yeah, it's an intoxicating place. It's a difficult place to drag yourself away from. It's popular, but kind of given just how interesting a place it is, like many places in Bolivia, it doesn't get the travelers that you might expect, and that equivalent places in Peru, for example, or in Argentina or Chile certainly do. So yeah, fun place.
Yeah, it gives me like, in some countries there's like places where people just don't leave. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking like, Laos, Luang Prabang is a classic like backpacker hub. That's got a similar vibe, nice little town by the river. People just don't leave. Like when it's Sucre, my hostel was just packed. I couldn't believe this place was even full. Some Irish guy was on the front desk. I'm like, oh wow, he probably works here. yeah, it's very interesting. I didn't really expect it, but I done a free walking tour in Sucre, and Sucre is one of those places you can do like a nice, easy walking tour. There's no hills to climb, there's no altitude to really consider. So it really is a setup to be like a nice place. And I'm not surprised that people do stay there and get stuck there, but you do have to get yourself out and get to other places. I want to go like west and east because I didn't go east. So I didn't go to like Cochabamba. Can we talk about the Amazon side of Bolivia? Have you been? Maybe some recommendations or things to go and see and do there?
Yeah, well, I'm really glad you asked me about the Amazon side of Bolivia because I love that. And people that generally associate Bolivia with the Andes, but actually a third of the country lies within the Amazon basin, and it's, in my opinion, it's the best part of South America to explore the Amazon because it's easier to visit, access, pristine.
This is a patron shout out to Laura from the Swamp Soup Stickers, who has contributed £5 to the podcast on my Patreon. Thank you so much for your support. Really appreciate it, and it helps the podcast to keep going in the future. If you're interested, head to the show notes where you'll find a link to my Patreon. The website address is patreon.com/Winging It Travel Podcast. For £5 English, you will receive some trendy stickers from myself in the post, a shout out on each episode, and also my digital travel planner by email. Thank you for your support.
Primary rainforest.
Yeah.
The key place for that is a place called Park National Madidi, which is you can access via a very long and often muddy and delayed bus journey, or an incredible and most spectacular flight from La Paz. Now, I try not to encourage people to take internal flights as much as possible, but this flight is it's only half an hour, but it takes you up over the Andes, and then you just see the Andes collapse into the foothills, and then into the Amazon basin, and you're often in a small plane as well. So it's genuinely spectacular. But Park National Madidi is the most biodiverse protected area on Earth. So there's circa 8,000 to 9,000 species there. Pink dolphins, for example, birds of paradise, piranhas, of course, jaguars. It's absolutely teeming with life. And it's also a place where you, as a tourist, as a traveler, can have a really positive impact with your tourism, because there's lots of indigenous run eco lodges. I'll give a shout out to a place called Chalalan, which I've stayed at, which is a real pioneer in this. And it's a way to both support indigenous communities that live in that region, and also aid conservation and aim to protect, and preserve this area, which is, like the Amazon as a whole, has lots of threats: illegal gold mining, deforestation, agriculture, poaching. And you'll see, as you explore, most of your exploration will be by boat, because there's very few roads in this part of the world. You'll see signs of this. I mean, when the last time I was there, when I was researching that chapter for the book, I saw illegal gold miners on the beach who were just sluicing water, searching for gold from the river. You see these vessels called dragons, which dredge the river bottom to find gold. So you see some of the threats, but you also see incredible rainforests and lagoons. And for me, short of going on a major expedition, there's no better place to explore the Amazon, and to have a positive impact while you do so.
Is this the classic case of like Bolivia just getting under the radar again? I mean, because obviously Amazon, you think Brazil instantly, right? But obviously that has its challenges, as we all know and read about. But yeah, probably people listen like, oh, Bolivia has by the Amazon. But the fact that a third of it is there, that's crazy. And I also love the fact that they're doing stuff to protect it, and it's like very much protected in terms of the biodiversity and stuff. I think that's a key point. I think some people might be worried, if you're going to visit, like, is it going to ruin the area? But the fact that you've got indigenous run like guest houses and eco lodges and stuff like that, and tours, I guess that helps, because they obviously are indigenous to the land and they know what it needs to be protected.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sustainability and responsible travel and restorative travel are key things for me as a writer. And people, understandably are not sure when visiting these places, but absolutely, this is somewhere you can have a positive impact. do your research. As I say, I recommend a place called Chalalan, which also has a tour agency, but there's other really good indigenous based operators there as well. Ask questions. If just because a company says they're sustainable, ask them what that means. Spell it out in practical terms. But yeah, I mean, essentially, this is a part of the world where there's not much in the way of legal, sustainable forms of employment. Right. Okay. So if you're going as a tourist, and if you're staying in a responsible eco lodge, if you're going with a responsible locally based tour operator, you're giving money to you're economically supporting local people. You're giving them a financial incentive to protect their local environment and the incredible wildlife that's there. So tourism can often have often has a damaging impact in many parts of the world. This is a place where if you do your research, you can have a positive impact.
There you go. I'll have to go, won't I? Because I didn't go. I think I ran out of time actually. I had to get to Peru to do the Inca Trail, but I think when I was leaving, I was like, I just wish I had a bit more of less of a time to finish because I wanted to go east, unfortunately, but I couldn't quite get there. So that's okay. I'll have to go next time. And it is on my list.
There's never enough time to visit everywhere.
And
you've got an excuse to go back, which is great.
Yeah, I need to go back to Bolivia. I love that place. Okay, let's go west. I think the classic route maybe people do, if they're probably familiar with the geography, is Salt Flats, probably from San Pedro in Atacama Desert up to the Salt Flats. I done a tour which included a border crossing there. The most strangest border crossings is a hut in the middle of nowhere. You queue up in the middle of nowhere, get your stamp, and you just go through an invisible line. But I assume that you've done the Salt Flats and then got into Uyuni. I mean, that part of the world is equally as breathtaking, right? I know Salt Flats. I don't know if you went in the dry or rainy season or both, but I went in dry season and that's just breathtaking.
Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky to have been several times. Okay. All in the dry season. I would love to go in the rainy season as well. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's one of the most dramatic landscapes on Earth. It's an otherworldly landscape. I mean, it's blindingly white. The Salar de Uyuni is the biggest salt flat on Earth. To put that in perspective, it's roughly the size of Jamaica. And it's surrounded by mountains. It's surrounded by volcanoes.
Yeah.
It's so flat that you can see the curvature of the Earth. It's kind of a hallucinatory landscape. I mean, I like to think it's the closest you can get to an otherworldly experience without actually getting on a spaceship and jetting off somewhere. And there were fantastic tours, as you say. I mean, a classic route is traveling up to northern Chile and to go through San Pedro de Atacama and crossing over and ending up in the town of Uyuni, which is on the edge of the salt flat. But yeah, you can also do tours solely within Bolivia. But yeah, it's the best known part of Bolivia, and even if you don't know the name, you will have seen photos on it on Instagram, on Twitter, and so on. Because you can, there's all these wonderful things because it's so flat and it's so uniform. You can play, these wonderful perspective trick photos and that kind of thing. Is really rich in history and cultures as well. There's lots of really interesting legends and mythologies around the salt flat, which was it was the seabed of an ancient inland sea that subsequently disappeared. And to bring it right up to date, salt harvesting was the traditional industry of the salt flats for thousands of years, and it remains important today alongside tourism. But below the salt crust of the Salar is some of the world's biggest deposits of lithium. Right, so lithium is a metal that is enabling us to have this conversation via Zoom today. Right, it's an essential. It's in all of our mobile phones, in our electric vehicles, in our laptops. Of course, it's the metal that powers the digital age.
Is that a problem?
Well, see, I mean, it's there's everything is nuanced, right? So it provides, there's huge reserves, and Bolivia certainly needs the money from that, and it's a country of huge natural resources which have generally been exploited by outsiders or a very small elite, not to the benefit of ordinary Bolivians. So there's hopes that that will be done differently here. but it's also in a pristine landscape. And can you extract this very valuable resource from below the salt flat without damaging this ecosystem and the indigenous communities that live around it? And it's relatively small scale extraction at the time, at the moment, but there's foreign investment, and there's understandably a desire to exploit it more. So we'll wait. We will wait and see how that develops. But I mean, I would say if you're thinking of visiting the Salar de Uyuni and you want to see it in this state, my advice would be to do it as soon as you can, because change is coming to that part of the world, it's hopefully it will survive, but I can't say 100%, confidently to you today.
I think now you told me that, I do worry. I just think that the systems that we live in would require definitely lithium, considering where we're going. That is a problem. Once some certain people get a whiff of that, it's going to cause. I'm just more concerned about the landscape. It's such a unique, untouched, almost just you can't even describe it really that well. You just have to go there. But yeah, the vastness of it just I'll be really worried that would be destroyed. If anything to go by with humans, they're pretty good at that. So yeah, I don't know. That's a tough one. But then Bolivians need to obviously have a bit more, I guess, income, I suppose, as a whole. But we'll see where that goes.
It's the challenge of sustainable development, and so it's that there are no, Bolivia is a place that you find there are lots of difficult issues and no easy answers.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you travelled just quickly? Was a uni like from the Bolivian side? Because I only went from obviously the Chilean side to cross the border to do it and then get into Bolivia. But what's the tours like, or what's the access like from the Bolivian side doing it all?
Yeah, so if there's any enthusiasts for railways, then there's a great railway journey to the salt flats. Bolivia doesn't have many surviving railways, sadly. South America as a whole doesn't have many surviving railways, but this is a great one. So it goes from the town of Oruro, which used to be a tin mining town, and that's just south of La Paz. And you get a train, the Espresso del Sur, the Southern Express, that takes you. In fact, it goes all the way to the Argentine border, but it passes through the town of Uyuni en route. It's an incredible journey. It's sometimes delayed, but you have absolutely spectacular scenery, and it typically arrives late at night in Uyuni, which is quite a small, very touristy, windswept town. So that's my favorite. That's definitely the way that I would recommend you visit. You can also travel by road as well, by bus. You can fly in as well. But unless you're really in a hurry, and if you want a more memorable journey, take one of the great railway rides in South America, and Oruro to Uni. It's you won't.
I didn't even know it existed. Yeah, wow, didn't know that. I think the advantage of doing the tour from Chile, include the border crossing, is you get to stay in the area, and again, it's quite high up altitude wise, and very cold. I remember like lots of lagoons, very sort of flamingos. There is amazing to stay in. I think I stayed in an ice hotel or salt hotel, salt hotel, I think, which had obviously no hot water or heating, because it is a quite earthy thing, and you sit around the fire like sort of huddling up with your colleagues from the Jeep. So it is an experience to do at least once, I think.
No, absolutely. And you can do it. Most of my experiences have been from the backpacker end of it, but there are luxury places to stay.
Okay.
And there's more options over the last few years. More options have opened up. As well. But it gets seriously cold. In one of the rooms on one of my research trips, which we had to, there was a sudden snowfall, which meant we had to go on a blizzard, essentially. So we had to go on a detour, and we ended up staying somewhere we weren't originally planning to. And it was pretty basic. And overnight it got to -21 in the room. So you definitely want to wrap up warm. You want sunglasses because it's blindingly white. You can get it's like the equivalent of snow blindness there. The weather is unpredictable, and things can change quickly. But yeah, it's like nowhere. It's like nowhere else on Earth. Quite apart from the salt flats, you mentioned the lagoons. You have lagoons that are stained red and
Yeah,
green
yeah.
through the minerals,
Mm.
and they're populated by huge flocks of flamingos, which flamingos we don't necessarily think of as a tough bird. They're one of the toughest birds
Yeah.
out there. So you get like an incredible insight into them, and also the small salt harvesting villages that are dotted around that area. You go through these 5,000-meter high passes.
Yes,
You
you do.
see
Yeah.
geyser fields.
Yeah.
You see these volcanoes, some of which are active.
Breathtaking.
It's a mind-blowing, mind-expanding experience, but you probably do appreciate your creature comforts when you get back to a uni or San Pedro de Atacama or wherever you finish up.
I think my advice would be do the 4 or 5 day tour, do all those things you just said and we just said, and then do treat yourself afterwards, because you are going to need just a nice warm shower and just a nice bed. I think I was actually a bit ill after finishing the tour in the uni, so I had to stay for a couple of days. Well, also when you drive in the Jeep, I think when they sort of like done the tour and they're blasting back to either a uni or probably to San Pedro the other way, I mean, it just goes on forever, but it's breathtaking. The ride, you can probably go as fast as you want. They got the Dakar Rally when I was traveling there. The Dakar Rally was going to be there. I don't know if it's still going now, but they switched from obviously Dakar to there. Perfect place to do it. Flat, just go race. In the dry season, that would be. Yeah, so I thought it was just a whole experience was incredible. I could not recommend it enough.
Here.
Also, La Paz. I've got to mention La Paz, haven't we? It's a big hub. It's a huge city. I didn't really know what to make of it at first. I think I like it. It's a bit crazy, but it's a hub, isn't it? It's probably a main place you're going to fly into.
Yeah, if you're flying into Bolivia directly, you're probably going to end up in La Paz. Santa Cruz on the east, which is almost to sea level, is the other main hub. But
okay,
people often sleep a little bit on La Paz. It can be a bit of people can sometimes find it a culture shock. Mainly, it's the altitude, because if you're flying in there, it's that it's the airport, if my memory serves me right, is 4,090 meters above sea level. So
wow.
So if you're coming from somewhere like London or Vancouver or that's a big altitude climb, and even in the center of La Paz, it's circa 3,600 meters. That's high, right? And you'll feel it. I mean, the way I describe it is you get an insight into the aging process, just because everything suddenly becomes more difficult. Climbing a flight of stairs feels like summiting Everest.
Eating.
So
the basic stuff.
And like the altitude can affect the way you often don't sleep very well because of it, and it takes a few days to get up to speed. But La Paz is a really, really interesting place. It's got a very rich history and culture. There's some great places to eat and drink there. The other place is La Paz is in the rim of a canyon. Is in the base of a canyon, and around the rim of the canyon, which is where the airport is the town of El Alto, which started off as just an informal settlement over the years, but has become one of the fastest growing cities in Latin America. It's actually the population there is now bigger than La Paz, and it's got a very, very strong indigenous, particularly Aymara culture. So Aymara, one of the biggest indigenous communities in Bolivia, and which is another place that people really often overlook, and there's lots of horror stories about it being dangerous and so on, often from people in La Paz. But you can definitely visit safely, and it's an incredibly enriching experience. They have an incredible architecture that has developed over the last few decades, which is kind of mind-blowing. Guide that I was there described it as firecracker architecture. It kind of combines lots of different elements and so on. There's some huge markets. There's one of the biggest markets in South America there. You can buy, give or take, everything there. legal and illegal. But it's a great place to eat. It's a very dynamic place. There's lots going on, and it kind of gives you a taste, a different taste of Bolivia. So Bolivia's natural attractions are fantastic, but don't miss the cities. And La Paz and El Alto rewards you if you spend a few days there, and set off and explore with an open mind.
Yeah, I didn't even know that was really a hub. I think I just went straight into La Paz. La Paz has got a backpacking community as well. Lots of hostels there, some very well-known party hostels. I think you can even find English breakfast in a pub that I went to once, I think, there. So I think you're going to be having some home comforts, if you like, if you get to La Paz, if you need it.
Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, La Paz is a huge backpacker hub.
Yeah.
You know, there's a very defined kind of center for it. There's loads of hostels and hotels and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
If you're missing a pub, you can find a pub there.
Yeah.
You know, if you're missing, British style Indian food, you can find it in there. You can. It's a very, it's a backpacker hub, but parts of it are a backpacker hub in the best sense of it. So yeah, if you're feeling a bit homesick, you can find a few tastes of home while you're there.
Absolutely. And very quickly, Santa Cruz. Didn't go there. What's that like as a hub?
Yeah, so interestingly, and I'm pleased you asked about this because again, people often overlook Santa Cruz or just use it as a transport base. But Santa Cruz is the biggest city in Bolivia, and it's over in the east towards the Brazilian border.
Yeah,
and so this is a completely different landscape. So this is lowlands, high, hot, predominantly, and Santa Cruz is a big, brash, modern city. It's the economic powerhouse of it. There's big agriculture there. There's oil and gas extraction and so on. Great nightlife, really good nightlife there. It doesn't quite have the character that you might find in places like Sucre or Potosi or La Paz, but it's a really, really interesting place, and it's also a good base for exploring other, that's eastern Bolivia. And so you can go north to the Chiquitos region, which has these incredible, it's kind of a wilderness of tropical dry forest, and dotted amongst them are these Jesuit churches that were founded several hundred years ago that I write about a bit in the book, but has a fascinating history. And now there are these incredible monuments. And you can also go to a place called Samaipata, which is this bucolic town surrounded by rolling hills. It's got some incredible Inca sites nearby that you can explore. It's also a jumping off point for the Che Trail, which is a trail through the mountains that retraces the last few days of Che Guevara, who arrived in Bolivia trying to foment a South America-wide revolution, and spoiler alert, it didn't really work out like that. But the Che Trail, even if you're not really interested in Che as a person, is beautiful landscapes that you often have on your own, really. I mean, I was on a cliff top on my last visit there, taking a few landscape shots, and then I suddenly felt like a gust of air kind of passed across my face, and a condor, 3 meter near enough wingspan, flew by, less than a meter away from me, just coming up on one of the air currents from above. So an absolutely incredible wildlife encounter there. So it's definitely worth exploring. There's also another interesting train route, because I know lots of people are interested in railway travel. So if you're coming from the Pantanal in Brazil, now Brazil has most of the Pantanal, which is the largest tropical wetlands on Earth, but part of the Pantanal is also in Bolivia, and you can explore that there. And there's a train that goes from the Brazilian border all the way to Santa Cruz, which was my first. That's how I first arrived in Bolivia. And the route was nicknamed the Death Train for various reasons. One of which was they used to, it was deathly boring because it was a uniform landscape and it took ages. One was that it used to transport yellow fever victims, and another is that because it was boring, people would climb onto the roof and have a drink and occasionally topple off to their death. So you can pick which story is your favorite, but it's a memorable way to arrive. So if you're traveling overland from Brazil, that's a great way to arrive in Bolivia, and also start to explore the east, which is which is overlooked within a country that in general is overlooked.
Yeah, because that eastern part coming in, that'd be a nice little starting point, right? Because I do remember going from like northern Argentina, Saltas, I think, to San Pedro. You're kind of on your way to Bolivia, just going around a long way. I was straight into altitude, and I was like almost altitude sickness on the bus. I was like, oh god, this is crazy. Like, there's no like settling in a little bit. But I think if you come from the east, maybe from Brazil into Bolivia through that train ride to Santa Cruz, I think that'd be a nice maybe start point just to get yourself maybe accustomed to Bolivia. You know, Santa Cruz is a modern city, but just to get even altitude, and you can maybe slowly make your way up to some of the higher points.
Yeah, definitely. If you're coming from the east and you've got the time, that's definitely the route that I would advise, because you can then go on to Cochabamba, which is a really interesting city in its own right, but it's the city of eternal spring because it has such a wonderful climate.
Hey, yeah, just a quick one. I just want to say there are many ways to support this podcast. You can buy me a coffee and help support the podcast with $5, or you can go to my merch store with the affiliate link with TeePublic, where there's plenty of merch available to buy, such as t-shirts, jumpers, hoodies, and also some children's clothing. Thirdly, which is free, you can also rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, or Good Pods. Also, you can find me on social media on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. Simply just search for Winging It Travel Podcast, and you'll find me displaying all my social media content for traveling, podcast, and other stuff. Thank you.
But you go up a little bit in altitude there, and then you can go on to Sucre, which again is another rise in altitude, but not so severe. And then once you're in Sucre, you can prepare yourself for either Potosi or for La Paz or for the Salar de Uyuni, or indeed for Lake Titicaca as well.
We've not touched on that.
So it's you know, the way to cope with altitude sickness, to avoid altitude sickness, is definitely to ascend slowly, and kind of take your time. I mean, classically flying into La Paz from sea level is give yourself, if you're doing that, give yourself a couple of days, really take it easy. Paseños, the residents of La Paz, will tell you to combat the altitude, to eat little, drink little, i.e. drink little alcohol, and sleep alone. And that should, if you follow that, then that will help with the altitude. Coca leaves and coca tea are also a classic way of helping to overcome altitude sickness. Not necessarily to my taste, but some people really like it, but it definitely works. But yeah, there's nothing like just taking it easy, really not trying to overexert yourself, and that's eventually you get used to it. And if you spend quite a lot of time at altitude, when you come back to sea level, you feel fantastic. You've had altitude training. So if you're if you play football, if you're a runner or whatever, you should be clocking some great performances and record times.
I think we went to Lake Titicaca. We might as well touch on this. This is a good way to get to Peru, right? I think we went to Peru that way, across the border to go and do the Inca Trail. But you mentioned the altitude, because you've been in Bolivia for, I was in there for 3 weeks, going to do the Inca Trail, which is still quite high up in terms of altitude from a normal perspective. But it was like going down to sea level. I was like, I can do this. And it probably helps me do the trek in Cusco. I thought, this is just like being at sea level. Love the place. I could walk around easily. So there is an advantage from starting high, going down low into Peru that way. But Lake Titicaca, unfortunately, I had a bit of bad experience. I was pretty ill. I've done one of the classic boat tours on the islands, the floating islands. But what's your experience of Lake Titicaca? It's huge, isn't it? As a lake as well.
Yeah. So it's the world's largest high altitude lake, essentially. Okay. So I mean, if when you arrive there, it looks like an inland sea. It's spectacular if you arrive from either the Bolivian side of it or from the Peruvian side of it. It's kind of roughly divided between the two. So it's an absolutely fascinating place. The gateway on the Bolivian side is the town of Copacabana. This is the original Copacabana. The Brazilian neighborhood, the Rio neighborhood took its inspiration from the Bolivian Copacabana. So that's where the original Copacabana beach is. Not quite as spectacular as its better known counterpart, and not quite as good for swimming. But Lake Titicaca is absolutely incredible, particularly if once you've acclimatized. The great thing to do on the Bolivian side is to take a boat over to Isla del Sol and Isla de la Luna, so the island of the sun and the island of the moon. And there's a great ancient hiking trail or pilgrimage route, because these islands used to be one of the biggest pilgrimage sites in the Andes. Before the Inca, they were drawing people from across the region. So the legend has it, according to Inca beliefs, that the sun, the moon, and indeed the Inca dynasty were born on Isla del Sol. And it's very rich. There's ruins there. It's a spectacular walk as well. You can do it in a day, particularly if you get some nice weather for it. It's absolutely stunning. And it's very easy to cross over into Peru. And on the Peruvian side, as you mentioned, you have these floating islands, which you kind of access from the Peruvian town of Puno, which are, for me, Puno as a town has less charm than Copacabana, but the floating islands are, even though they're quite touristy now, they're really, really interesting places to visit. And you get an insight into, something that probably you haven't encountered before. So Lake Titicaca is one of the great sites in South America, and it's good preparation if you plan to hike the Inca Trail or do any of the various routes to Machu Picchu, because it just acclimatizes you to the altitude and to walking and hiking at 3,500 meters plus above sea level.
Okay, that's great. And one final question about Bolivia in terms of places. We did mention it, Cochabamba. I didn't go there, but it's always on the map. I was like, I need to go there. I don't know why. I thought that maybe someone told me in the hostel you have to go there. But you mentioned the Eternal Spring, but what is that place as a hub? Because I think in my mind, I see it as like a nice little idyllic place to go and see. But again, I've not been there, so I have no experience.
It's a really, it's as I say, the climate is wonderful. It's parts of it are quite modern city. It's a popular place for Spanish schools and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
A lot of people will go and learn Spanish there. It doesn't quite have the touristy, the traveler scene or the backpacker scene that you have in La Paz or Sucre. But I really I've got a lot of affection for it. The local cuisine is very good. There's some great restaurants and bars and nightlife to do. And also, if you're vaguely interested in dinosaurs, the wider Cochabamba region is really interesting, because there's some incredible, Bolivia is very rich hunting ground for dinosaur footprints, fossils and so on. And there's lots of sites that you can visit around there. And also just geographically, because it's roughly in the center of Bolivia, it's a useful hub. Now that doesn't make it sound particularly glamorous, but if you're traveling, these places are really, really useful. So if you need to, break your overnight bus journeys, if you need to get laundry done, if you need to, just need a bit of time out in pleasant surroundings. But it also, one of its most eye-catching sites is the statue of Christ that they have on a hill, which as locals are very proud to tell you is bigger than the one in Rio. So not to criticize Rio, but it doesn't have the original Copacabana beach, and the statue of Christ is smaller than the one in Bolivia as well. You know what? If you're on limited time, is not somewhere that I would say you've got to make a beeline for.
Okay.
But if you've got time to spend, and definitely if you're on a wider trip, it's definitely worth calling in Cochabamba and having some good meals and chilling out and enjoying some pleasant temperatures.
God, do you know what? Like all these things that you've mentioned that I've not been to, and coupled with places I've been to, like there's so much to see and do in Bolivia. It's ridiculous. Like no wonder you wrote a book about it, and you spent a decade going back and forth, because I don't think people realize how much there is to see, but also the diversity of it. Like there is, it's like, I guess USA is always like this. Like there's so much things in USA to go and see. That's why we've done a road trip this summer, because there's just like an unlimited amount of different type of things to see and do. Bolivia is the same, and I know it's much smaller, but the way you go from east to west and like even south to north, like it's just a plethora of things to do. And I probably would encourage people maybe to try and stay there longer to try and see as much as they can. And it's also, I don't know if you agree as well, one of the cheapest places to travel in South America.
Absolutely. It's well worth spending. It's a cost-effective place to stay. It's much cheaper than Brazil or Argentina or Chile, Peru even. And it's incredibly diverse. In some ways, the coast aside, it's like a microcosm of South America as a whole. You can see virtually every landscape you want, from kind of deserts to glaciers to rainforest to lakes to mountains to volcanoes to kind of it kind of has everything, and that diversity in landscapes is reflected in its people and in its cultures and in its languages and in its food and stuff. And I just think I was really lucky just to visit when I first did as a backpacker, and I was very lucky to work on the rough guide to Bolivia, because that really opened up the place to it and kind of and in it all the inspiration, and my love for the place, my passion for the place, really I tried to feed into the book. And the nicest, I've done quite a lot of, I'm always doing lots of book talks at bookshops and events and that kind of thing. And the nicest compliment that I've had on the book is that a couple of readers who read it have said, I've booked my tickets to go to Bolivia off the back of it. And I kind of thought, if I've inspired you to visit, I've done my job, really, because and I've tried to be comprehensive in the book, but there's still areas that I want to visit, and that's the nice thing. So I'm looking forward to going back at some point in the future too.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest compliment you can get. If you just convince someone to go, that's it. You can't get any better than that. Yeah, and for me, I always put it in. People, I get asked all the time if I'm on this podcast, but also on the guest from other podcasts, that top 3-5 countries that they're always up there. Bolivia is always in there because I just have a bit of an affinity to it. Even though I went to other places in South America, there's something about it that just caught me a little bit. Yeah, but I'm desperate to go back, so I got to figure that out, I think, for sure. Okay, so we talked a lot about Bolivia there, so I'm just going to go towards you. Where can people find your book, and also where can they buy it, and websites and social medias and stuff like that?
Yeah, so Crossed Off the Map, Travels in Bolivia is available from all good bookshops. If you're struggling to find it, you can just look on my website, which is shafikmeghji.com, and I'm at Shafik Meghji on all the social media sites that you can think of. And there's links to places to buy it, including some if you're in the UK, some independent bookshops, which I'm always a big champion of. And if you go to my website, shafikmeghji.com, you can see all my latest articles on and books and events and talks and that kind of stuff. So I'm fairly easy to track down.
I would tell people as well that if you go onto Shafik's website, I went in there this week, and you can just click on the numerous articles that he's written. Like, honestly, there's we didn't talk about Patagonia today, unfortunately, I think, because I prefer to stay in Bolivia because it's a more niche episode. But yeah, people can go on the website, click on all your articles and read them, and they're just great because they give you an inspiration, an idea into many things you've written about, not just Bolivia, but also you've covered even UK travel at rainforests and stuff like that. That I was really interested in. I was touching that today, but maybe another time. But yeah, so I would implore people to go to your website. And do you do a blog as well?
I don't. I don't. I have done in the past. But I don't at the moment, just because all the other writing commitments kind of get in the way of it. But I love. I write about travel widely, and there's a lot of focus on Latin America and South Asia. But I'm a Londoner, so I do things close to home sometimes as well. So you can check it out on my site, and it'll be a pleasure to come back and chat to you about some of the other places, including Patagonia, which is one of my favorite parts of the world, and definitely a place that deserves its own episode.
We'll do another episode on it. Yeah, I'll hold you to that. And my final question before we get into the quickfire travel questions: what's coming up on the horizon? What have you got maybe planned for work or personal travel? What's coming up? Maybe, I don't know if it's too late this year, but going into 2024.
Yeah, so I'm in the novel situation of having a holiday, wow. Many travel writers don't go on holiday. But we write about the benefits of holidays and often don't live by our own words. So I've been trying to do that over the last few years. So I'm going to have a holiday, probably a week away somewhere in Europe, at the start of December with my girlfriend, but we haven't decided. It's a bit of a last minute thing. We haven't decided yet. So it's quite nice to have a bit of spontaneity about it. So it's not, because normally my research trips are planned many months in advance. So I'm kind of, it will be somewhere in Europe, but hopefully somewhere we haven't been to before. But a bit of a change of scene before Christmas.
And anything in 2024 for like working wise that you maybe can say? I'm not sure.
Yeah, so there's a few places that I'm in discussions, let's say, about planning research trips. But I don't, I'm hoping to be back in South America as well. Probably not Bolivia, but kind of hopefully in Argentina and or Chile at some point. And I'm also hoping to visit Central America, which is somewhere else I always also write about. So so I'm hoping to visit them in let's say the first half of next year, but nothing confirmed as of yet.
Oh, exciting times. That's cool. Okay, I'm going to put the links in the show notes so people can just click on them and take a look. I'm just going to finish some quick fire travel questions. I do kind of make these up as I go.
It's travel question time.
Probably 10 or so. The more your favorite things, but as someone who's traveled a lot, I'll probably give you 2 or 3 options, so you don't have to pick one. I'm going to kick off with, this is a single answer. Do you know how many countries you traveled to?
Not off the top of my head. I mean, I would say around 60 probably, but I mean, I'd have to toss it up.
Ballpark is 60. That's cool. That's fine.
Ballpark is 60.
Yeah. And what about 3 countries of those 60, maybe apart from Bolivia, because we talked a lot about it today, that you would tell people that are your favorites in no order?
In no order. Well, Argentina. I used to live in Buenos Aires. I'm a huge fan of Argentina.
Yeah.
Nepal. Absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible place. And where would be the other one? Well, I write a lot about Chile as well. So if I have Argentina, I have to say Chile as well. So Chile, Argentina, and Nepal.
Yeah, 3 great countries. Okay. And 3 countries you've not traveled to that's next on your hit list personally, not with work.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the great pleasure of travel is there's always further to go. So I would love to go to Central Asia, really. So the old Silk route. So if you allow me a region rather than a country, I would go for the old Silk route. And the same with West Africa, which I haven't spent any time in at all. So I would love to go to somewhere like Sierra Leone. Kind of very, very, very under-traveled there. And well, I mean, that's I would say China as well. I've been to Hong Kong, Macau, but I've not been to the rest of China. So that's probably enough to keep me busy for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, what about 3 top favorite cuisines on your travels?
Oh, okay, good question. Indian, Mexican. It's going to be a tough one. Look, it would be boring if I said French or Italian or anything like
especially
that.
Italian,
so I'm going to go. So I'm sure lots of people say that. So I was, I'll go with some 2 Argentine dishes rather than the culture at all. Okay. So the asado, which is the classic steak barbecue. So that on an estancia on a ranch somewhere in the Pampas, and ice cream in Buenos Aires. And so that part of Argentina, Mexican food in general, Indian food in general.
Yeah, Mexican and Indian in my top 3 as well. Okay, what about one city in the world you can drink coffee just for an afternoon and sit there and watch the world go by? Where are you going to sit?
I'm going to cheat and I'm going to give you 2. Buenos Aires is one of the great coffee shop places. But somewhere that I visited on a holiday early this year was the Italian city of Trieste. Great city, really, really interesting city. Also, so fascinating place, birthplace of Illy coffee as well. So there were some great coffee shops there in kind of the Viennese mold. So I'm going to cheat and go for those 2.
Oh, interesting. Okay, if you could pick one country in the world to live for a year, and you're going to stay there for a year, which country are you going to live in? You can't pick Bolivia.
And I won't pick Bolivia, and I won't pick Argentina. I did move there and live for a year.
No UK either.
No UK either. Well, no, that's I'm happy to do it. In South, somewhat like Colombia, which I spent some time in, but I would like to spend more time in, just because it's such a diverse country, from the rainforests of the Amazon to the Caribbean coast to the Pacific coast to the Andes. So I had a great time there. Really, really interesting place. So I'd like to explore it more. So I'll say Colombia. Okay.
And top 3 favorite countries that has the best coffee to drink. You can label them in order or not order. It's up to you. But I'm a bit of a coffee drinker, so I'd like to know which countries on your travels have the best coffee.
Best coffee. Well, I am going to have to include Italy, which is the obvious choice at this point. Yeah. So Costa Rica, fantastic coffee, particularly give a shout out to Finca Rosa Blanca, which makes absolutely wonderful coffee, a lot of on volcanic soils. So those two. And it may be because it's fresh in my mind, but I was speaking at an event in Vienna recently, and Viennese is famously good for its coffee houses.
Dreamy.
And it's not a surprise like Italy, but the coffee houses are sensational. So I'll go for them too.
Okay. And what about top 3 favorite walks or hikes or trails?
Okay, good. First one, easy, is there's in Puerto Williams, which is the southernmost city on earth in Chile, in Tierra del Fuego. There's a hike from there up to a hill called Cerro Bandera. And that's the start of the Dientes de Navarino trek, which is a sensational wilderness trek. But this trek you can do up and down in a day on your own. And you, in one direction, you view the Beagle Channel, and the other direction, you look at these incredible snow-capped mountains and lakes and scree. And pretty much, if you're looking south from that point, there's probably no one in between you and the South Pole at that point. So that will be one of my favorite hikes. Not too far away, but the hikes in Parque National Los Glaciares in Argentine Patagonia, particularly from the town of El Chalten, are great. So the Laguna de los Tres trek, for example, is a great one that you can do on your own. That's really good. The other one, I mean, if you're going to ask me to pick my favorite Nepali trek, I think I'm going to be wrestling with myself all day. But a trek in the Annapurna foothills, perhaps. Not necessarily the Annapurna circuit, but kind of those ones are really accessible ones if you just want a bit of a taste. I would love to do the Great Himalayan Trail, which goes the length of the country. So if I can get someone to fund me that, then or to commission me to do a long form piece on that, then I'm sure that would be my favorite. But those would be one of the ones I'd give a shout out to.
Well, I met a couple of guys doing it this year in Nepal. They hit into a problem. They got to Langtang. I was in Langtang. They got to Langtang, just up Kunjungumpa, which is like one of the highest places you get to the Langtang Valley. And then they're going to make the pass, and it snowed overnight, which they weren't expecting. And the pass, they were advised, was going to be closed for a week because the weather was pretty bad. So I couldn't believe it, but they just hiked all the way back to Kathmandu. I'm like, can't you just stay here and just wait? They're like, nah, we'll go Kathmandu, we'll take a rest and we'll go back again. But because I'm not much of a hiker, the thought of hiking 4, 5, 7, 8 days to Kathmandu from there is huge. And they're going to come back again and do it again. These guys are crazy. But I think one was from Bangladesh, one was Nepali. Great couple of guys, get bumped into them on the trail. I didn't really know much about it until I talked to these guys about what that trail is. But that'd be great if someone could commission you to do that sort of experience. But that's quite long, isn't it? That's a fair trek.
I mean, I'm not sure how long it would take. And as your story says, I mean, you've got to have some flexibility because snowfall can close those high passes, in a moment's in a moment. So if I can take it, maybe I need to take out another gap year to do that.
Fair enough. What about 3 countries from a backpacker perspective that are best for the budget that you've experienced?
Okay, interesting. Well, Southeast Asia is obviously a classic backpacker. It's been the backpacker destination for decades and decades. I love Laos. Now, Laos often, another place is often overlooked But that's both very good value and an incredible place to visit. So I would definitely urge anyone in that part of the world, to Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand. Obviously, you've got loads going for them. But Laos is a really, really interesting place, and you can still get off the beaten track, to use that horrible cliche, a bit, to find areas that are far less touristy than you'll find in the neighboring countries. Nepal will be another place to go to because it's very, very cost effective. Again, it's one of the great backpacker countries on earth. If you love hiking, obviously it's great, but it is much more to the country than that. Particularly in the south. So if you can go on safaris on a budget there. So the southern lowlands, which border in Chitwan and Bardia as well. Bardia, if you've got a bit more time, for the one-horned rhinos and wild elephants, tigers, if you're lucky.
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky. And it's very cost effective. There's there's loads of great places to stay. The food is really good. There's great traveler scenes across that. So you asked for 3, didn't you? So I've given you 2. If you're going to Nepal, it's really easy to tie into India as well. And so on any visit, you can only ever get a tiny taste of India. If it's again another great cost-effective backpacking destination. And if you go and give a particular shout out to the northeast, which is often overlooked, really, really interesting.
The Seven Sisters.
The Seven Sisters, indeed.
Okay.
So again, great mountain scenery. Really, really interesting culturally, different types of food, different perspective on India, and by and large, you're not going to see many other travelers. So if you really want to see places that are, as I say, overlooked, slept on a bit, but have a lot to offer, I'll give you Northeast India.
Like the untouched part of India, really, isn't it? It's
definitely, and
a place on my list.
I mean, Assam is the state that people of the 7 states that people know, but Arunachal Pradesh, the land of the dawn-lit mountains.
Nagaland is Nagaland one.
Nagaland is there. Meghalaya, which has 2 of the wettest places on earth there, which maybe for British people that's less of a novelty, but,
and for Vancouver people as well.
But they're very varied. It's a different side of India. There's very it's and absolutely spectacular scenery in Arunachal Pradesh, particularly. An incredible part of the world.
Okay, 2 questions left, and then I'll let you go. The next question might be a bit of a surprise to you. Is there a place you didn't like, or you had a bad experience?
Yeah, it's funny. Again, it's. I'm sometimes asked this, and I kind of there's nowhere that I really the place that haven't really clicked with me. I mean, I haven't spent a lot of time in Dubai, but Dubai was, the day that I spent there was not my favorite day. But there would definitely be parts of it that I would enjoy, that I would be interested in exploring. I spent a lot of time in, rather grimy border crossing towns in between India and Nepal. That have not been much fun. That are not necessarily, border towns. Are always a bit like that. But I'm not in a rush to go to do any of the land crossings from India to Nepal or vice versa. Put it like that.
That's a fair point. Okay. And the last question is, if someone's listening right now who's maybe a bit nervous about going backpacking or going to a country for the first time, or even international travel, is there a few words or sentences of wisdom you could maybe advise them that they should take the leap and get out there and go and travel?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge advocate for backpacking, for traveling independently. I definitely understand that it can feel a bit daunting, and particularly if you've never done it before, or if you're coming to it maybe a little bit later in life. But it's an incredible. I think everyone should travel independently at least once in their life, because actually you get a much richer insight into the places you're visiting. Invariably, people are really friendly. There's always, traveler communities in almost everywhere that you go. There'll be lots of people in the same boat as you, who you'll meet on the road, and you're more likely to meet if you're traveling on your own, or if you're traveling in a small group, than if you're going on an organized tour. You know, don't get hung up on safety aspects. Obviously, there's safety things to take into account in various parts of the world, but don't let it put you off. And take the plunge. And and while you're away, it can be difficult, but just talk to other travelers, talk to local people. Just get used to, if you can try and get used to doing that, you'll have an incredibly rich experience. You'll make friends for life, meet your partner, possibly. You never know. Yeah. Lots of these things happen, but you'll have these incredible connections, and you'll definitely have a much richer insight into it. So try not to feel daunted. There's lots and lots of reliable information out there, so you can go forearmed. But yeah, kind of take the plunge. You definitely won't regret it. You can, as close as I can give you to a guarantee, you won't regret it.
Well, that's awesome. Shafik, thanks for coming onto the podcast. It's been a great chat. I'm actually glad we've done a Bolivia one, because you can sometimes just dip into places and talk about Patagonia and Bolivia, and we could have gone to Rio, we could have gone to UK, I don't know, but I think it's more defined if we'd stuck on Bolivia, because you obviously wrote a book about it and you traveled there extensively, and I've done a bit there as well. So I think it's been a great chat about Bolivia. I think people get a lot out of this if they're thinking about that as a country to come to. So thanks for coming on.
Oh no, my absolute pleasure. And it's the best thing with these is always when it's like a free flowing chat, as it was with us today. And there's, I can talk for Bolivia about Bolivia. So so hopefully it'll be, hopefully that'll be useful, and it will encourage some listeners to plan their own trips. And maybe if they need some reading material on their trips, then obviously there's a book out there that they can take along with them.
And don't worry, that book will be in the show notes and available to purchase from all good and bad bookshops. So I'm sure people can access that. Yeah, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it.
No, my absolute pleasure. Thanks for inviting me on. Get me back on to talk about Patagonia another time. That'll be or Welsh rainforest, or islands in Essex, or
whatever, I saw that one. Yeah,
whatever you like. Cool. Take care, mate.
Take care.
See you later.
All the best. Bye.
Thank you for listening to my Winging It Travel podcast episode today. You can find me on Instagram at James Hammond Travel, or Winging It Travel Podcast. You can search for both. I release weekly clips of this podcast episode, as well as photos from the last 8 to 10 years of my travels. You can also follow me on TikTok, Facebook and Pinterest by searching Winging It Travel Podcast. I do release daily content to do with travel and the podcast throughout the week. Also check out my website, jameshammond.org. There's content about myself, my travels, and there's also a newsletter sign up as well as a contact form. Finally, please rate and review the podcast on Podchaser. This is my platform of choice. Alternatively, you can rate this on Apple or wherever you get your podcasts from. This really helps the podcast gain a bit of traction for the future in terms of guests and content. And I'm glad to see that you guys are listening out there, reviewing it and enjoying the content so far. Stay safe, stay humble, keep listening, keep traveling, and I'll catch you soon. Cheers, James.